Welcome to another edition of Grace Under Pressure, or my guest today is my friend, Davin Salvagno. I'll tell you all about Davin in just a moment. Grace Under Pressure is that show that deals with the soft stuff, the caring, the commitment that too often gets ignored in organizational settings. But when you try to build these cultures as a leader, as you will definitely discover Gavin is, you do it with the purpose of bringing people together and achieving great results. Welcome, Davin Salvagno. So
John, it's always great to be with you. Excited for our conversation. Thanks for having me back.
I will, and I'm going to go to widescreen because I want to see the reason why we're here, which is your brand new book, Thieves of Purpose, which is in the lower left-hand corner there. You are a best-selling author, and Thieves of Purpose, 12 mindsets robbing you of your purpose and potential. But I want to tell folks all about you. You are a corporate executive in many leadership roles in ops, HR, marketing, even finance. But you found that your real passion is enabling others to find their purpose. So you, for the last 6, 7, 8 years, you've been an executive coach, and like me, you're a member of 100 coaches, and you're also the co-founder of the Purpose Summit, which we'll touch on later. Davin Salvagno, welcome to Grace Under Pressure. So
that was quite the introduction, John. It's so good to be with you. Excited to dive in today.
Well, great. Anyway, Davin, Thieves of Purpose, there are lots of books on the topic of purpose. I've even written 1 or 2 myself, but I've never seen such a title or such a concept of thievery. So where did this idea of theft come from when in reference to purpose, Davin?
Well, as you all know, I mean, we've been talking and writing about purpose for a long time and how to find it and how to lead with it, which was the title of your book, and all different ways to talk about what purpose is and the power of it. And I had been speaking and talking about it for more than a decade. And, one of the things that I started to question was the stuff seems so simple. It really does seem easy, but so few people are actually able to step into the fullness of their purpose and potential. And I started to question why that is. And I started to come across different thoughts, different tactics, if you will, that rob us of our opportunity to step into our purpose and potential. And I thought, maybe I should unveil those and write about what those are and talk about how they show up. And then when they do, how you can confront them so that you don't miss out on a moment to step into your purpose and your potential. And that's where Thieves of Purpose came from.
That's great. Wonderful. Before we jump into the thievery portion, I want to frame the concept of finding one's purpose, but also reinventing it. What's your perspective on that? And because I think perhaps these items of theft help us either reinvigorate or find a new purpose. What's your perspective, Davin?
I'm so glad you want to start there, because I think in order for us to talk about what robs you of your purpose, you need to first kind of revisit where does it come? What is it? Where does it come from? And, a lot of people avoid the conversation of purpose because it's so big, right? This idea of what's my purpose? What's my life's purpose? I mean, people have been asking what's the meaning of life since the beginning of time. It's a massive, probably the biggest question we could possibly ask. And so when you have something that is that big, it's intimidating. And so we tend to not answer that question. But if you look at purpose differently, as not singular and grandiose, but as plural and momentary, if you look at purpose through the lens of I've got multiple purposes and every moment is an invitation to step into one of those. I've got a purpose as a father, as a husband, as a speaker, as an author, as a musician, as a business leader, as a coach. There's lots of purposes I could step into. The question is, what is the moment inviting me to do? What are the gifts, talents, abilities, skill sets, insights, and experiences that I have in my head and in my heart that I can bring to the moment to positively impact the lives of those around me, to contribute in such a way that adds value? That's where purpose lives. And if we're not careful, as we talked about earlier, we can have thoughts that sabotage us, that distract us, prevent us from being aware and stepping into those moments.
Wonderful explanation of purpose and its various iterations. So let's jump into the thievery. And the one that I think is the first that you address, is a topic that our friend Marshall Goldsmith often talks about, and that's comparing yourself to other people who have whom you perceive have succeeded. So tell us about comparison, Davin. So,
So comparison is the first thief that we talk about, and it's probably the one that most people struggle with, especially today in social media. People are constantly looking at the lives that other people are living in comparison to the lives that they're living. They look at how many followers other people have, other engagements they have, and everyone is trying to become like someone else rather than just being who they are. And social media has perpetuated that. And one of my favorite quotes used to be, comparison is the thief of joy, which was attributed to Teddy Roosevelt. And I used to say that all the time. I used to believe that until I really started to think about that. And, I questioned, is comparison really the thief of joy? And I was having a conversation with a business class that I was teaching years ago. And we had a debate around this topic. And the reason I brought up the debate is I said, I really feel that it depends on who and what you're comparing yourself to, because we tend to compare ourselves to those who have more or who have achieved more, or we look at others and we say, hey, we want that for ourselves. And so what happens is we tend to compare ourselves out of envy. We tend to compare ourselves upward, but very rarely do we take a look around at what we have or what we've accomplished that maybe we were blessed with or fortunate with that others have not. We don't compare ourselves through the lens of gratitude. And if we did, then we would realize that that gratitude could actually yield to joy. So it's not a matter of whether comparison is the thief of joy itself. It's comparison through the lens of envy is the thief of joy. But it's actually when we take a look at this and we could say, okay, am I experiencing envy? How do I confront that thief? Well, stop and immediately make a list of the things that you're grateful for. And when you do that, when you find that you are comparing yourself through envy and you stop and you make a list of the things that you're grateful for, all of a sudden you will start comparing yourself in another way. And that will lead you to joy and actually will be an invitation for you to then maybe think, how can I step in to help others? Where are there opportunities for me to serve? How can I activate my purpose? So comparison can rob us of our purpose, but through the lens of gratitude, it actually can invite us back into our purpose.
I like how you leverage the lens to go inward to outward as a means of serving others, something that you've certainly done in your life and continue to do through the Purpose Summit that we'll talk about at the end of our show. Now, there's another thief that kind of surprised me, and I'm wondering, where does this come from? And you use the word indifference. What does that mean in relation to purpose, Davin? So,
So indifference is a very subtle thief. We tend to be very indifferent to a lot of the things that are happening around us that we could step into, again, that could be invitations into purpose. It could be as simple as the person that you're passing by on the street that needs help. I can't tell you how many times that I've been driving and seen someone stuck on the road, and there's that thought in my head of like, should I turn around and go engage them and see if they need help? And so this whole self-dialogue conversations, did I just miss an opportunity to activate my purpose because I was indifferent to the need of somebody else in the moment? So it could be that granular, or it could be on more of a global scale. We could see the hurt and need and problems that exist in the world that we could do something about, but because they don't immediately affect us, we're indifferent to them. And then therefore we don't step in to the opportunity to activate our purpose and to make a difference. And if you look at a large amount of the controllable tragedies that have happened across time, and we can list what those are, but I don't want to. I mean, take example of the Holocaust or other different horrific human tragedies. A lot of these things happened because people were indifferent in the moment. And if people had seen what was happening in the moment and they chose to step into those moments, there's a lot of things that could have been prevented. Now, there's other things that are not controllable. Take, for instance, the recent floods in North Carolina due to the hurricanes or the fires in Los Angeles. Those are natural tragedies. But again, my desire to help out usually depends on my proximity to the need. So you have this kind of thing happening in society right now where there's this, well, wait a minute, how come people in North Carolina aren't receiving the same amount of, support of those in LA and vice versa? And so again, our proximity to where the immediate need is, when things hit home for us or it becomes too close to home, that's when we tend to want to jump in and do something about it. But the reality is that we are called to activate our purpose regardless of our proximity to the need. And when we recognize that, we can combat the thief of indifference and step into moments that we otherwise would not have.
Great. Now, I liked how you framed indifference as something that might be subtle, but another thief is not so subtle, I'm guessing, and that's guilt. Tell us about how guilt erodes purpose.
Mm.
So,
Guilt is a quiet thief. Guilt is something that, if we're all being honest with ourselves on some level, shape, or form, there's something that we're carrying with us that's a weight that's holding us back. And you'll notice in these books, by the way, a lot of the thieves interact with each other. There's a lot of crossover. So, like, distraction itself is a thief. And so guilt can distract us. We can find ourselves dealing with guilt, and then that guilt can distract us from being fully present in a moment. I could talk on a practical level. For example, we have kids that are 14 and 10 years old. We're trying to be very, very intentional as parents in this season. And we know that this season isn't going to last forever. We've got, 4, maybe 6 years before they leave our house. And so how do we make the most of every moment? And so a lot of times our kids will want to be doing their own thing. They'll want to be, they don't want to be around their parents. I mean, when I was a kid, I didn't want to be around my parents, but we're trying to be hyper intentional with them. And so what'll happen is there's this tension between letting them do their own thing or us wanting to, step into our purpose as parents in the moment. And we let them do their own thing, and then we feel guilty about it. We sit here and go, oh, I should be out playing football with Bennett, or we should be taking Vera to, go do this, but they really don't want to. And so then what happens is now guilt arrests us in that moment. And then Amy and I can't be intentional with each other because we're operating out of the sense of guilt of something that we should be doing, even though they really don't want to. So that's a practical level. On a deeper level, I've got some deep pains that I've carried with me from things I've said, things that I've done in the past that I haven't forgiven myself for. And as a result of that, I can live in those moments and live in the past and dwell on those things. And if I'm dwelling on the past, then I'm not present in the present. And so I'm missing opportunities to be who I need to be in the moment because I'm too busy focused on who I had been previously. And, you and I have a dear friend named Mark Golston who recently passed away. And we had a conversation around this. And, his last words to me were, Davin, have you forgiven yourself yet? And those words were so powerful. I talk about him in the conversation we had in the book, because whenever I, find myself dwelling on things of the past that I can no longer change, but I recognize that dwelling on those things is robbing me of the present, I hear Mark say, Davin, have you forgiven yourself yet? And that allows me to pull my focus off of the past and refocus on the present so that I can look at moments of purpose that are around me that I might be missing.
perhaps aligned with guilt, and you talked about how these the thieves, I believe there's 12 of them, interact with one another, and I'm guessing the next one that we'll discuss, lies, is akin to guilt. So tell me about how lying does not help your purpose.
Well, we really struggle with being honest with ourselves, let alone being honest with others. And we have a great friend, Ron Carucci, who wrote also a Marshall Goldsmith 100 coach and someone who's spoken at the Purpose Summit a couple times and will be back again this year. But he wrote a fantastic book called To Be Honest, and he correlates it to purpose in that book. And, when we are not honest with ourselves, let alone honest with others, we can't activate our purpose. Purpose has to come from a place of honesty. We need to be honest with who we are, what truly our gifts, talents, abilities are, and how we show up. And a lot of times what can happen is we can start to tell ourselves that we're not good at something when we are. that we're not qualified when we are, that we're not capable when we are. And so we start lying to ourselves, and then these self-defeating thoughts prevent us from stepping into our purpose, right? A great example is this very book, Thieves of Purpose. I didn't feel qualified to write the book. It's been said that, the person wrote the book on that, which would mean that they're a subject matter expert. They've conquered all things on the topic that they're talking about. Well, here's the sobering truth, people. I still struggle with all 12 of the thieves that I wrote about in that book. And so if I start listening to the lies in my head of, well, you're not qualified to talk about these things because you haven't mastered them, well, then I won't talk about them, and therefore I won't write about them. And then now I'm actually being robbed of my purpose as an author and speaker on talking on the very subject that we're talking on. And so I have to reframe that and say, well, wait a minute, hold on. Is that true? Is that lie really true? Or is it true that everyone deals with these thieves on some level and no one has really mastered them, which then maybe actually makes me qualified to speak and write on them? And so a lot of times you have to monitor the self-dialogue that you're having with yourself that says you're not good enough, you're not capable enough, you're not whatever that is, and really challenge the premise if that's true. And the way that you do that is by listening not to your voice, but to the voices of others who have spoken into you. My wife, Amy, is a very talented photographer and writer. And every single time that she has written something or taken pictures, people tell her what a tremendous photographer and writer that she is. And so when she starts to tell herself that she's not, I have to ask herself, well, has anyone ever told you that you're not a great writer or a great photographer? And of course, she'll say, well, no one's ever told me that. Well, then therefore that thought's not true. But have people told you that you are a great photographer and writer? Well, yes, they have. Well, that thought is true. So which truth are you going to listen to? Because if you listen to the lie, then you're not going to step into your purpose. But if you listen to the truth that people have told you, then you will step into your purpose.
As you were explaining about the lies and how we short ourselves, it's really akin to the imposter syndrome, which comes from the sense of self-doubt. And I'm somebody who believes very strongly in the power of doubt as a governor on ego. You were talking about underselling yourself. Too often, or sometimes, we could oversell ourselves. Not that it's always that bad, but it's dealing with it. So if I'm feeling that I'm not quite up to it, what's a trick or a technique to adopt, Davin, to get us over that hurdle? So
if we're underselling ourselves or if we're overselling?
yes, underselling. I'm not worthy to do this. I'm not good enough. That type of thing.
So I think the very first thing that you have to do is look in the past and say, okay, where have I used whatever skill set it is that I'm telling myself that I'm not capable of or worthy of? Where have I used this before? And has it made a positive impact in some way? And then start telling yourself the stories of where people either thanked you, where you did make a difference, where it did show up, where it did make an impact, because then those thoughts will actually defeat the self-limiting thoughts. One of the things that I have done over the years, and not out of a vanity piece, but just out of a way to, jog my own self-doubt when things happen, is I have kept tons of messages and thank you cards and notes of things that people have sent me, either from some conference that I spoke at or because of a book that they've read that I wrote. Where in the moment where I find myself, maybe I shouldn't talk about this, or maybe whatever the case is, I have to stop and read those notes. A great example, John, is the Purpose Summit. The Purpose Summit, we talked about this, a little earlier. We'll talk about it a little bit later. It's a massive undertaking. And each and every single year, sometimes I need to think, man, am I really capable of pulling this thing off? Am I really worthy of doing something like this, of convening this level of people together? And so a lot of times I'll have to go back and read some of the messages of people who sent me words of encouragement of how attending the summit in the past changed their life, changed their company, changed their family, changed their marriage. And then in doing that, I have to say, okay, if it was all for this one person, would I do it over again? And the answer is yes. And then immediately all of those thoughts of inadequacy flee. And there's this conviction that replaces that no, I need to step into this. This is an invitation of purpose that somewhere someone is counting on me to step into because it made a difference in the past. So if you find yourself struggling with inadequacy, ask yourself, where have you made a difference in the past? Who's told you that it mattered? And start telling that narrative to yourself, and then the self-doubt narrative of inadequacy will flee.
Great. I'm glad you I'll jump in and talk about the Purpose Summit when I've attended two of them and found them very invigorating and a real sense of community. And I note the fact that you have said this is your sixth one is coming up in late April, is it?
May this year. So May, normally it's late April. This year it's pushed back a little bit. It's May 13th through the 15th. Actually, May 12th through the 15th. We've added an optional first day conversation around that later. But yes, May 12th through the 15th.
And I have seen, having been a participant and as well as an attendee, I've seen the energy and the excitement. And it's interesting that you say that you've done five so far. You're working on your sixth, and it is a lot of work, of course. But I'm glad you confessed, if you will, about this sense of self-doubt, because I don't think it ever leaves us, but it's something to deal with and to keep us going forward. And as you said, find those points of strength, those points of affirmation that drive us forward. So it's a good thought to keep in mind. It's like when we look at successful, it gets back, I think, to your success, your one of your thieves is this comparison, like, oh, Davin's got it made and he's got this whole conference and it just works by magic. Well, no, it doesn't. And I think all the same thing I go with great entertainers. You're a musician, you play in public, you know that you feel nerves and things when you go out there, which is a good thing. It means you're human and that you care. So I appreciate that moment of candor. So now we're getting into something else. Going to flip it again. When is it okay to quit? And how does that play into the role of purpose?
Yeah, and that's a really great question, John, because I think most people, they quit prematurely. They quit when things get hard. They quit when the pain. I heard this really, really great joke one time, and it was about this guy who was giving a presentation, and there was a dog in the background, and the dog was barking during the presentation, and the presenter stopped and he said, "Hey, can someone silence the dog?" And then the dog kept on barking, and then he kept on going, and he stopped again and said, "Hey, can someone, get the dog?" And they said, "Just keep on going, just keep on going." And he keeps talking, and then the dog keeps barking, and he stops again. And he says, "Hey, the dog." And someone says, "Don't worry about it. He's sitting on a tack." And the person says, "Well, why doesn't he get up?" He says, "Well, I guess it doesn't hurt enough yet." And so here's the thing, is that until the pain of remaining the same is greater than the pain of change, we don't get up. And so when it comes to quitting, a lot of times what happens is people start to quit prematurely. And then if they do that, it leads to regret, right? Man, I wish I would have kept going. And then now the pain later that they experience is much greater than the pain if they would have kept on going. And so the reason I equate it to that tax story and the pain is because there are moments to quit and there are moments not to quit. And so there are things that are causing extreme pain that are unhealthy in a lot of our lives that we probably should quit. And we need to recognize when those things are happening, right? Whether those are, self-destructive behaviors, addiction, toxic relationship, a toxic job. There are things that are detrimental to us that when that pain is so significant, we have to recognize that, hey, maybe the pain of change isn't as bad as staying where we're at. So that's when it's okay to quit. Where it's not okay to quit is simply because there starts to be pain, because it starts to get hard. Because here's the thing is, they take it to go into the gym, for example. Anyone wants to get in really great shape, they have to go through some pain to get in that shape. And that pain can be good, right? And so you have to ask yourself, the pain that you're enduring, is that pain healthy? And if the pain is healthy and is leading to something that is going to make you a better version of yourself, for your family, for those that you lead, for whoever, if the pain that you're enduring is positive, it's always too late or too early to quit. always too early to quit. But if the pain is negative and self-destructive, then perhaps it's never too late to quit, too soon to
Right.
quit.
Now, I want to talk about something that, as our last one, we can't cover all 12, but one is important because it's a positive, but you frame it a little differently, and it's success, which we all strive for. And then, so I'm asking you, is it better to define success or leave it undefined? What's your perspective on that, Davin? So,
Well, I think we have to define it in order to acknowledge it as a thief, because success by and far is accepted as a positive word. Who does not want to be successful? Who doesn't want to succeed? Everyone wants to succeed. Everyone wants to be successful. And there's nothing wrong with success. However, our fixation upon success can rob us of significance. And significance is where purpose actually lives. Halftime, one of the most impactful books that I've ever read by Bob Buford. Bob puts it this way. He says, you can live a successful life and miss out on a life of significance, but it's impossible to live a life of significance and not be successful. And really, the difference between success and significance is your impact on others. There's a lot of highly successful people who have amassed, great fortunes. They've done lots of great things for themselves, but they're extremely unfulfilled. I know far too many people who are highly successful, but also highly unfulfilled. There are others out there, though, who maybe they haven't achieved the same levels of success in the way that the world would define them, but they have lived lives of significance where the impact that they have is unquantifiable, it's immeasurable, and their level of fulfillment is, off the charts. And I would offer that definition of success is a lot more valuable than someone who's achieved a lot of things that we can't take with us, things that are fleeting versus things that outlive us and last on for generations. So there's nothing wrong with success in and of itself, but if it's robbing you of your significance, it's robbing you of your purpose.
well, and significance versus success. We want both, actually, and weighing the significance is the greater, as long as it has a positive impact on others. Which leads us to a favorite topic of mine, as you know. I'm going to ask you, Davin, as I ask every guest, a story about grace. Is there something you want to share with us? So,
Mm. Well, grace is probably my favorite word next to purpose. We both have an affinity for that word. You asked me this question the last time I was on the show too, and I talked about my bride Amy and the gift of grace that she is to me, because I don't feel worthy sometimes of the tremendous person she is, and being able to call her my bride. So I won't give you the same answer today. Today I'll give you a different answer. And, I once asked my pastor at church, I was struggling with grace. There was a time, believe it or not, where I really struggled with letting people go when I was, in a managerial or leadership position. I struggled with, firing people or letting them go when I know that they weren't the right fit or they weren't performing, whatever the case is. And part of the reason for that was I extended too much grace. I was constantly giving second, third, fourth, fifth, 10th, 12th, 100th chances. And the reason why is because I'd screwed up so much in my life and people had given me so many second, third, 10, 20th, 100th chances that I felt it was my responsibility to pay that forward. And my pastor said this to me. He said, I think you have a misconstrued definition of grace. He said, in order for grace to be given, it needs to be asked for and accepted. And I was like, ooh, that's so good. In order for grace to be given, it needs to be asked for and accepted. And the thing was, I was giving grace to people who weren't asking for it and they weren't accepting it, which is why they continued to take advantage of me. And I think when it comes to ourselves, we need to give ourselves a lot of grace. None of us are perfect. Our dear friend Gary Ridge talks a lot about how failures are learning moments. And a lot of times we look at failure and then we live in guilt and all these different things, and then it robs us of our purpose. But when we redefine failures as learning moments and we give ourselves grace, we can step forward. The thing is, we have to ask ourselves first, can we give ourselves grace, or are we worthy of grace? And two, can we accept it when we do? So for me, it's such a powerful thing, because when you talk about one of the things that's robbing us of our purpose, it's constantly not extending grace to ourselves to allow us to forget what has been, forward into what can be.
That's powerful. I'm glad you touched on the concept of showing oneself grace, because too often we overlook that. And when we show ourselves grace, I think we're more ready and more able to show grace to those around us. So
That's right.
anyway, Davin, we're coming to the end of our show. And how can people find you and the book? So.
Well, certainly on LinkedIn. I live here on this platform, so connect with me. Love to have a conversation. The book is available wherever books are sold. You can get it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, wherever you'd like. And of course, you can go to davinsalvagno.com for more resources, connect with me, and listen to podcasts, other books, and such.
Great. We will put that in the notes. And Davin, thank you for joining the show. And with that, we will go out.